There are so many bold characters in this series. Was this made for me? Is this hashtag bold goals? So am I going to be cool now? Is this gonna work?
No! God, please, no! No!
Welcome back to Torn Apart, and today we're doing something quite weird which I started this summer. It's a series called The Virgin Reviews, where basically I look at something that a lot of people love, and in this case it's a new adaptation of the series Avatar the Last Airbender, and I give you my deconstruction, my analysis, not knowing absolutely nothing about the series itself. And when I say that, I mean the original series, the animated series, which so many people out there love. And I'm also talking about the M. Night Shyamalan movie adaptation that came out a couple of years ago, which everybody agrees it's completely disgusting. So I'm gonna be answering the questions for the normal people out there, the ones sitting in the middle of the street, looking up at the sky and wondering, what do I do with my spare time? Can I watch this series even though I'm not emotionally attached to the material at all? Is this gonna be fun? What are my expectations? Let's start with the synopsis, right? What is this about? And it's basically about the four nations of air, water, earth, and fire who lived in harmony until the Fire Nation declared war. A century later, there is still no end in sight to the destruction, but when an avatar named Aang discovers that he has the power to control the four elements and restore balance and harmony in the world, he joins forces with Katara, a waterbender, and her brother Sokka to do just that. It's 8 episodes, it's on Netflix, of course, and I was kind of worried, mostly because even though I really enjoyed One Piece, Netflix is not really well known for making perfect fantasy series. And let's start with my spoiler-free thoughts here. This series is far from being perfect. First of all, I think 8 episodes is definitely not enough to tell this story. I feel like it's following a straightforward storyline almost too much, and every single time that we try to divert from it and we actually do some character development, we actually hang out with the main characters, we're kind of lost and we kind of forget what the main point of this season is supposed to be as well. And I feel like it could have been fixed if it had just maybe 2 or 4 episodes, just to create a better pacing so that we know that we can take the time to know these new locations, these new characters, and there are not only world-shattering stakes, and it's not just about saving us from the apocalypse, but this is where the series really goes wrong. Aang basically is supposed to save the world, and it's kind of weird when he's just standing around like talking to people and he's not training at all, even though everyone around him is like, you should probably train, you should probably learn to use all the other powers so that we can actually win this war. And he's like, okay, fine, I'm gonna ask advice to that guy, then we're gonna go to another episode, I'm gonna ask advice to that guy, and he never learns actually anything. That's the weird part. I feel like Aang is not really leading us towards anything within this series, and I feel like the 2 other characters are actually our main characters more than Aang is, which is a bit odd at the end of the day, especially if you compare this to One Piece. You can really tell that the main character of One Piece was Luffy. He was driving the narrative, he was putting all of these people together, and we don't really have that sense here. One thing that I also didn't like about this series is the CGI, and mostly the blending of real people with CGI locations, all of the green screens. Honestly, I could really tell where they were, and that's a big problem when it comes to big series like this. And honestly, if you compare this to The Witcher, for example, The Witcher actually felt real. It felt like a place that I would like to visit and that actually existed. The place in Avatar the Last Airbender doesn't look real at all. It has a lot of details, of course. I'm not trying to say that it's rushed. It's just that you needed way more practical locations to make us care and to make us believe that where we're standing right now, it's an actual place. The thing that they did well though, which funny enough it's not what they did with The Witcher, the creature designs look incredible. All of the animals, all of the monsters that you can see here, they are either disgusting in a good way or they are just magnificent to look at. You can tell really all the details of the hair. You can really tell the glint in the eyes of these creatures as well. They look real. They look more real than the landscapes themselves, and it's a huge problem because this is a universe that actually looks really cool. You've got the different elements, of course. It's probably inspired by Asian cultures and gods and that kind of stuff. You could really tell that it feels different. And you can tell also that the casting, there is a lot of representation going on, of course, and it works so well in the favor of a series like this. It really feels like a place that we never visited before, and it really sucks that you don't really believe that it actually exists. So I don't even think I would recommend it to normal people, just because you're gonna be disappointed. It's just gonna go by and you're gonna be forgetting about it like the day after, mostly because there are so many series like this. We have Lock and Key, we have the recent Percy Jackson show as well. I don't know, they're just missing something. They're just not taking the time, and you could really tell that they're trying to save budget where they can, and at the end of the day the result is very meh. It's very fine. I'm not gonna call this the worst adaptation ever. It's definitely an interesting series, but it's definitely forgettable as well. Now that we have set up the expectations, and I'm saying that I didn't recommend this, let's go into details. Let's go into every single episode and nitpick everything that I didn't like about it and that didn't work for me, so that if you watch this series, we can share a moment together. And if you're a fan of the original Avatar the Last Airbender show as well, let me know down in the comments if the things that weren't really clear with the live action format were lost in translation, or if it is something that happens in the original show as well, so we can keep going with the conversation, of course. Let's start with the first episode, where I started having some problems already, mostly because there is this thing in fantasy storytelling where we present the status quo. This is important because it kind of sets up the stakes of the universe. I mean, think about all the time we spend in the Shire before Gandalf eventually sends Frodo on his quest. Here we are presented with Aang. We are told things, but we're not really shown things. We get description of things he is and things he did. He has a full monologue that is just full exposition, telling us how he feels and the fact that he's gonna lose all of his friends because he was just basically revealed to him that he is the Avatar and he has a lot of responsibilities, and he'll have to leave the Air Nation basically to go travel around the world and to stop any rebellion that he might find. And I was sitting there being like, couldn't you just spend a little bit more time making us feel all of these things? I know maybe it's not something that happened in the original thing as well, but when you're adapting, when you're interpreting something, you could definitely change it and make it better. And for me, from a character perspective, if we want to relate to Aang, if we want to identify with his pain, the fact that he's lost basically 100 years of his life, all of his friends, all the people that he loved have disappeared, and most people of the other nations, they don't even remember the Air Nation just because it happened so long ago. If you want to feel that, you make us actually care about it. And this is something that doesn't happen in the first episode. I feel like we're rushing through all the different exposition, and the whole part before the time jump just doesn't work for me, and it feels like a scene that they had to put there, but they didn't really use it well to actually make us care about this universe and these characters. It's so weird at the end of the day when they do these kind of time jumps, because they're showing us something, they're presenting us something, and then immediately we have to forget everything about it and move forward into a universe that we don't know. So pacing wise, it's kind of weird because we're already introduced to a universe and then we have to be reintroduced to something that still we don't know. So you spend the entire first episode being like, okay, why do I have to care about any of this? Even the whole thing that they completely decimated the Air Nation in one attack. I mean, I understand that the Comet Festival was happening. I really can't believe that you could fit an entire nation of people in one city for one specific weekend or day because of festivities. So it was incredibly weird. That's what I'm talking about when it comes to rushed storytelling. And one thing that they don't do really well is explaining how the magic system works within this universe. That's something that bothered me from the first episode to the very end, and every single episode just created new questions for me. So we have the four elements, right? We have fire, water, air, and earth. And we have no idea exactly what's the difference in between a normal person and an airbender, a waterbender. We still don't understand that, even by the end of the season. And we don't understand where this power is coming from. Because they say that they learned it from the spirits, so the moon spirit, the ocean spirit, and whatever the fuck. But at the end of the day, the energy that is being used to be transformed into air, fire, or whatever, where is it coming from? Is it coming from your inner strength, as in actual food, actual energy that you have stored inside yourself? Can you airbend until you die? Can you airbend so much that basically you strain yourself and you just fall to the floor and die? And you may be sitting there being like, am I being too nitpicky? I don't think so. I'm gonna give you an example of a magic system that is incredibly clear and has a set of limitations. And once a magic system has a set of limitations, you believe in it, you believe in the universe, and you actually feel cool about knowing how it works. Let's talk about Brandon Sanderson's magic system. When it comes to the Way of Kings franchise, we have a lot of different radiants whose powers are related to a source of light, which can be stored into little spheres, basically, right? And once you run out of that source of light, which is power basically, and you've got different kinds which can store a different amount of power, once you run out of that, you cannot basically surge bind anymore. You cannot use your powers. So you cannot fly anymore, you cannot create illusions, you cannot heal people, because there is a limitation to those powers. And this creates like a sense of realism within something that does not happen in the real world. And my problem with Avatar the Last Airbender is, where is the water coming from? When you're water bending, I mean, in some scenes there is actually water around them. They use fountains, for example, to use the water and then channel it and transform it into ice and stuff like that. But the fire people, there is no fire anywhere. So from where is the fire actually coming from? And that really bothers me. The earth people, for example, they clearly get the earth from the actual earth. So it comes up and then they use it in different ways. But the fire people, I really don't understand where this fire is coming from. It would have been so easy to do it like in the X-Men, for example, where yes, you can manipulate fire, but you cannot create fire out of nowhere. Meaning that you have to find a clever way of manifesting fire, or using lighters, using torches. It doesn't really matter, as long as there is a system of creating fire so you can manipulate it. And this happens with Pyro, for example, in the X-Men universe. That's how his powers work within the live action movies. And this really bothered me so much, because once you cannot understand what the limitations of certain powers are, then you cannot really relate to fights. There are so many fights where firebenders were completely decimating people. They decimated an entire nation in the first episode, and then firebenders turn into complete idiots for the next few episodes. I think there is even an action scene towards the later part of the season where it's people with no powers, they're not bending anything, who actually defeat a group of firebenders. Makes no sense. Also, it is established within one of the episodes that the earth-bending nation is the only one that hasn't fallen with the water-bending one as well to the fire people, basically. And there is this one scene, for example, when one of the main characters is trying to free his uncle because he's been imprisoned by the earth-benders, and they're transporting him from one place to another, and him by himself is able to firebend and defeat all of these earthbenders, I think it's 4 or 5 of them, in a single second. Once again, I don't understand. You're setting up the rules that basically the earthbenders have been so good that they haven't been defeated in more than 100 years of Fire Nation attacks, and then there is just this one guy who's also a teenager, by the way, who ends up hurting them so much. It makes no sense. And of course, if you want to jump to the very end of the season as well, it is also shown that they're trying to pretend that basically attacking the Water Nation is the main goal of the Fire Nation, while actually their plan was to distract them so they could attack the Earth Nation and make it fall. And this is actually what happens, and it's one of the main characters that I don't like as well. It's the girl who is always trying to show to his father that she's really capable, and most of the scenes that she has is just her with her 2 best friends, and they're just talking like, oh my god, I'm gonna show them how it's done, I'm gonna show them that I'm the best firebender that has ever existed. And she's not doing anything until the very end of the series, where she conquers the Earth Nation, and it's done completely off screen. That's so fucking insane. That's so fucking insane. You literally established that the Earthbending Nation was impossible to conquer, and you just did it off screen while we were fighting them at the Water Nation. And I was sitting there being like, are you fucking kidding me? That's so fucking insane. It's so weird. So once you don't have limitations within the power system, within a magic system, you don't believe anything. anything. You don't care about anything because nothing has stakes, because you don't understand what is going on. For example, sometimes they call the Air Nation the best weakness versus firepower, but that makes no sense from a scientific perspective, because fire works when there is oxygen, and air is actually oxygen as well. So technically you could snuff out the fire if you take out all of the oxygen around a firebender, for example, but technically you would feed the fire if you add more oxygen to it. Right? Isn't the water nation supposed to be the most threatening to the fire nation? It's literally water. You can create a wall of water and fire cannot go through it. I really don't understand. The entire final act of this season made me go insane. It was so incredibly stupid, and it works just because literally they take out the powers from the waterbenders, but even then it makes no sense. This is why I'm talking about limitations, right? You can see all of these boats attacking the water nation in the 2 final episodes basically, and it's boats on water, and you have an entire nation of waterbenders. Why can they not use the water in the water, like in the sea, to actually bring down the boats? It makes no sense. They're just sitting there and they're just waiting for them to attack, and they're not doing anything. There is actually no fight at the end of the day, and that really bothers me. That's so stupid. You created this water nation which is hidden from everywhere, and it's also surrounded by an ocean which is part of your power, and they don't do it.
Why? 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 Why?
They should have had a scene where basically they communed all together, and maybe you could have established that it takes like a lot of waterbenders to join their powers or whatever the fuck to actually move something like the ocean, to create waves or something like that, and then create a disturbance so that they're not able to do it for long enough to destroy all of the boats. There were so many things like that. Maybe it's something that is explained in the animated series. It's 100% plausible at the end of the day, but for me, in the actual series, it makes no fucking sense. It's so incredibly stupid. Also, talking about powers and limitations and stuff like that, there are so many characters in this season that they get captured and they're put into prisons and they just escape in like less than 2 minutes or like 5 minutes at the maximum, really maximum. Talking about sacrifices, we have a big problem this season where Aang doesn't learn any of the other bendings in this season. We have 4 powers, he has only 1, he only has the air bending, and he doesn't learn any of it in the first season. Are you saying that he's gonna learn 1 every single season and this is gonna be like a 5-season torture chamber? What are you doing? Like, you could have at least give him like 1 power, maybe the water power. It would have made sense since most of the 3rd act actually happens over there. Instead, what he does is that he keeps sacrificing himself, giving his body to previous avatars, giving his body to other spirits so that they can use the avatar powers using his body, and he's just sitting there being like, I'm a puppet and I'm giving myself up to this. This happens 2 times, but I was almost sure it was gonna happen way more. It happens with the first avatar that is introduced in the first few episodes, and it happens at the very end with the ocean spirit who basically takes him and uses his power to destroy all of the boats. But of course, this is Avatar, this is a children/teenager series, so his sacrifice is not gonna mean anything, because at the end of the day, they find a way to free him, and someone else at the last minute finds out that she can sacrifice herself to restore the moon spirit because she has some moon spirit blood inside of her, and all of this is done in like 1 episode. Honestly, like, there are so many things, magical things as well, that are introduced over and over again, and you're just sitting there being like, I don't care about any of this. You're rushing it way too much. And because of that, Aang doesn't do anything within the entire series. He goes to visit every single ancient avatar to learn something from him, and the advice that he gets is always completely stupid and very like philosophical. It's nothing concrete that will actually help him learn other bending arts, basically. And that was so stupid. Honestly, that was so stupid. I was not expecting him to have all the powers by the end of the first season, of course, but I feel like when you're trying to construct a series like this, you have to give us something. And I feel like with the Aang character, you didn't give us anything at all. He's a child, he's very naive, he's likable a little bit at the end of the day, kind of like Luffy in the One Piece adaptation, but he doesn't really have that much of a personality, mostly because you did a really poor job establishing how he is with other people and what what his ideals are as well. He kind of goes from being nothing to being the Avatar, and he's not even an Avatar because he doesn't have all the powers, so he goes from being nothing to being nothing. For the entire series, there is no progression, and it really sucks. I mean, I still think that the lore and the powers, they look quite cool. I think this might be one of the best looking kind of like magical powers that I've seen in a really long time. It looks way better than Percy Jackson, and I believe it way more than Percy Jackson, of course. Why are some people getting like burnt, for example, when they get touched by fire, as you can see in the first few episodes, and then the more you progress across the different episodes and no one actually gets injured in the way that they should by these powers. There are so many people that should be completely burned, almost alive at this point, just because of the firebenders and what they do, and it really sucks that we don't really see those consequences. I'm not asking for this to be R-rated, but I am asking for the powers to actually manifest some way on the human body and not just be CGI things that you throw at people, and if you throw water, earth, or fire or air, the injury is still gonna be the same. So I'm not gonna believe it, right? It looks stupid and it sounds stupid just to think about it, not to even watch it. I've heard that there are some elements that have been improved in this series, and when I mean improved, I mean representation wise. For example, one of the main characters, I think it's Sokka, he's supposed to be very sexist, and he makes a lot of remarks like that to most of the other characters, and they completely deleted that, which is kind of weird because you're kind of deleting progression in character development from a main character. I'm not asking for him to be that way, but at the same time, if you delete that, what are you going to replace it with when it comes to his character development? And I also have one thing that they kind of mentioned towards the very end, I think in the last 2 episodes, where in the water-bending nation, they talk about the fact that women use water-bending powers to heal people and not to fight, and women are not allowed basically to fight. I don't understand really if this is just for the water nation, because the earth nation, I think most of the guards are men, but if you look at the first few episodes, you see there is a community that is just women fighting. So I really don't understand if this rule applies to all the nations or just the water nation, but even just because of that, it should have been teased way earlier, so that basically the character of Katara would have something to prove to herself and to everyone else and to society at large, just in general. But just the fact that it's teased at the very end of episode 7 and that she has to prove her worth to one of the water bending masters, and there is this entire fight that they're doing, I'm like, it's way too late. You shouldn't have done it now, you should have done it way before. And also the master changes his mind way too quickly. He changes his mind by the end of episode 8, where basically she has proven her worth, and now maybe the law is gonna change. But the law has been like established only like an episode ago, which for us is like barely an hour ago of screen time. So once again, it has no stakes and we don't really care about it. Visually speaking, I think this season is still quite interesting, mostly because episode from episode we're traveling to different lands and it looks different. That's the best that we can say. There's even a moment towards the final part of the season where once the moon spirit has been killed, everything goes monochrome, and the only color that actually comes through, it's the fire. And that was a really cool thing to do. You could really have the feeling that we're losing hope of winning against the Fire Nation, and the fire is the only thing that will linger out of this conflict at the end of the day. I really didn't like most of the villains. I think Zuko is incredibly stupid when it comes to his performance and when it comes to just the way that he wants to lead everyone. He's screaming Spy Kids when it comes to his performance, so I didn't really like him. I preferred his uncle and his father. Is it just me, or he looks like a Mortal Kombat villain? I know that Mortal Kombat is kind of relying on cliches, but they didn't do anything to kind of like make us understand why this person is the way that he is, and the way that he's always surrounded by fire. It literally looks like we are on a Mortal Kombat set, so I was literally laughing at him every single time that he pops up on screen. And same goes with Azula, who is the other daughter I mentioned before. She comes straight out of Shark Boy and Lava Girl. So incredibly cringy. I don't like her, and I don't know if it has to do with the writing or her performances. She was very cringy. But I think this is basically it when it comes to this season. I think there is one thing that I really like. It's called the Face Stealer. He looked incredibly threatening and scary, but that is basically the only positive, memorable thing that I can bring to this video. Let me know down in the comments if if you've seen this series, what you thought about it. If you're a fan, feel free to correct me down in the comments and to tell me how everything works in this universe. But of course, remember that this is from the perspective of someone who has never seen anything Avatar related. So for me, the live action adaptation was just incredibly poorly written and, structurally speaking, way too rushed. And I feel like it's really hard to argue against that. But anyways, if you like this video, as usual, I'm gonna put right down here all the videos where I go around the same topics as the one that I talked about today. I'm gonna put you my other Virgin review as well. If you're interested by watching One Piece, why not? And here at the top, I'm gonna be putting the next topic of the videos that is coming out in 2 weeks. Don't forget to smash that like button, because every single time that you do that, you make sure that bold people around the world get more representation and get more powers.
Can I count on you?
Maybe we're all avatars at the end of the day. Do I look like an avatar? I hope I do, because it's the only positive thing we have going on right now. I'm Patrick, and this is Torn Apart.
Back in the 90s, I was in a very famous TV show.
Earth. Fire. Air. Water.
Da 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 da